I call to order the regular city council meeting for Monday, April 1st, 2024 at 5:30 PM. I'd ask you at this time to put your phones on silent or vibrate to limit interruptions. Moving on to the first item on the agenda, and that's the roll call.
Burlingame.
Here.
Evans. Janser.
Here.
Olson. Here. Pittner. Pajagula. Ross.
Here. Item number 2, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We can make a note that Councilman Padragula is in attendance. Moving on to item number 3, and that is the mayor's report. I guess first off, I just hope everybody had a wonderful and blessed Easter with their friends and family over the weekend. I had a few activities since our last meeting. We had the League of Cities in town, attended the Alcohol Review Ordinance Review Committee. We had lunch, a group of us had lunch with Representative Armstrong when he was in town. Task Force 21 met with Senator Hoeven to discuss funding for Minot Air Force Base. Also had a meeting with the Park District and 1 or 2 or 3 one-on-ones with the city manager. And that concludes my report. If there are any questions? If not, we will move on to item number 4, and that's the city manager's report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. First and foremost, I'd entertain any questions with regards to the city manager memo that was prepared and included as part of the packet this evening. Not hearing any. A couple of things here real quick. First and foremost, we'll ask Mr. Joyce and Mr. Billingsley to come present an award that the city received from the governor's office here a couple of weeks ago.
Mayor, Council, good evening. Brian and I were fortunate to attend the governor's reception last council meeting. That's why we weren't here, so I counted that as an excused absence. But on behalf of the mayor, the council, city manager, really the entire city, and the governor's Main Street initiative, our facade improvement program was recognized for the Smart Efficient Infrastructure Award. So Brian and I were very, very happy to receive that on behalf of the city. Brian?
Yes, and this is the award here. I'll present it to the mayor, and we're available for any questions.
Are there any questions? Carrie?
I don't have a question, but I would like to give public acknowledgement to Jonathan Rosenthal, who is retired now from the city, but his efforts in the Main Street Initiative and the Facade Improvement Program helped get us this award. So if you're listening, Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Next, we're going to start a new process here. We're going to have Dave Lakefield, our finance director, come up, and once a month, underneath the city manager report, we will provide a verbal finance report to the council and to the community. We're hoping that this will help with some transparency and some of the questions and misunderstandings. We'll do it this evening, and then starting next month, we'll do it at the second council meeting of each month. Mr. Lakefield.
Good evening, members of the council. Like Harold said, we just wanted to bring some information in front of you to kind of give you a little more insight on what's going on with the city on a more regular basis. The finance department does update reports monthly to the city webpage, and we have monthly reports, we have quarterly financial reports, and of course all our budget and annual reports are on that page as well. This is intended to be a little bit more timely information and maybe break that information down into bite-sized pieces that are a little bit more easier to understand as we go through this. The focus of tonight's information is going to be just high-level information where we ended up 2023, and at the next presentation we'll start to dive into a little bit more detailed information as we work through the completion of the annual report and where we ended up for the year at 2023. This isn't going to work. So sales tax collections, and I know you've all seen this report, so we tried to use some different colors to spice it up a little bit, but there's a lot going on here, and the idea behind this is just showing how volatile sales tax collections can be. So we started out 2024 on a high note. January was the highest deposit that we've seen in the history of sales tax for the city for a month. So that was a good start. We are very optimistic on how sales tax collections are going to go. However, some of the economic data that we see nationwide what makes us to be a little bit cautious in how we approach that with the upcoming budget. So here's some data for sales tax collections from 2016 through 2023. These are actual numbers for the year. And you can see we've had that pretty much a steady incline in collections. We have seen some years where that's decreased. 2016 itself was a challenging year where it had decreased quite a bit from the prior year, and they had to make a number of budget adjustments in midstream. So that also impacts how we approach our forecasting for sales tax collections. Hub City oil and gas collections, again, these are year-to-date or fiscal year end results. Very strong the last couple of years. We're slightly off of last year's numbers. As long as the price and production both remain strong, we would anticipate seeing some strong numbers. But if either one of those or both starts to slide, we can definitely see a decrease in those revenues as well. So some facts on property taxes, and this is some trends over the last few years, and we see a lot of misunderstanding on how property taxes are used in our budgets. These are just some statistics for the last several years. In 2024, property taxes made up about 14.3% of our overall budget. Public safety, which includes police, fire, dispatch, municipal court, the public safety functions accounted for about 86.5% of our property tax revenues. And then the bulk of that money is personnel related to the public safety as well, because the bulk of those departments is people. This is some historical data for the mill rate and collections from 2019 going forward. So we have seen a little bit of a decline in the rate and then level off. And that decreased rate now in today's world generates more tax dollars than a higher rate would have in 2019. That's a combination of a couple of factors. It's increasing value, but also new properties that are coming online or remodels, those types of things that have added value. Some collections data here from 2019 again to 2025. So we've seen about an 8.4 increase over 6 years in our property tax collections. It's about a 7.2% decrease in the mill rate in 5 years. And there's a little bit of difference there because we don't know what the mill rate is going to be for 2025 yet. But we're under the assumption at this point that our dollar amount that we're going to collect for 2025 will be the same as 2024. So we already know that information, but we don't know where the mill rate will be because we're not sure what the values will be yet. So if we do the math on that, that's an annual increase of less than 1.4% for the last 6 years. So I'll stand for any questions, and just a caveat here that we anticipate this is the first of several presentations. We'll try to keep them short and small little segments and then entertain any questions that you might have. And if there's anything in particular that you would like us to highlight, just let us know and we'll try to focus on that on one of these presentations. And with that,
Are there any
answer
questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Dave.
questions.
Are there any questions? Steve?
Yes, Carrie's asked this before, so I want to give her credit, but what are our fund reserves overall? And will you be giving us a breakdown by fund on a monthly basis in the future?
I can, Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, I can give you a breakdown on the reserves by fund, and I'll caveat that with a number of things. There are some things like flood control, for example, where we carry reserves in there. They are only to be used for a specific purpose, and sometimes we have contracts that are already out, money
Pending.
in the fund balance yet. So we can definitely put that out. We actually just printed that information in the Minot Daily News. We're required to do that annually, so I can certainly get you that information.
I'm sorry, I just usually read it online. I apologize. Rough idea of what the overall reserves are, realizing some of them are allocated.
I guess I'd be a little bit cautious on throwing out a number. Overall, I would say maybe in the 80 to 100 million range.
Okay, and a lot of that is spoken for, though.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, it is, and some of it is statutory reserves, so we have to keep that, bond covenants, all of those types of things. So there are some of those fund balances that are statutory reserves or that we are prohibited from utilizing.
Right, it's not as if we have this in our checking account, we can just go write a check for whatever we want, whenever we want. It's not that way at all.
That's correct.
I understand, thank you.
Any other questions? Scott?
Dave, you mentioned a little bit about, obviously, the primary driver of increased property tax revenues has been the increase in valuations and new properties coming onto the market. Is there a way to break down which of those is each? Like how much of the increase is based on valuations and how much is based on new or significantly improved projects or properties?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Burlingame, I'm guessing that we can get that. That's our city assessor's repertoire, so we can lean on him, if that's possible. Or maybe he knows the information off the top of his head.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think that'd be good information to have as we move forward.
Any other questions? No further questions? Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.
You can continue on. Harold.
I have nothing further if the council has no further questions underneath the city manager's report.
Any questions of the city manager? Seeing none, we can move on to item number 5 on the agenda, and that's the city attorney's report. Steph?
Mayor, members of council, I submitted a written report, and I can stand for any questions you have.
Are there any questions of our city attorney? Any questions? Thank you, Steph. Seeing none, we will move on to item number 6. That is our consent items. We have 19 items on the agenda for consent. Are there any that need to be pulled? And I know I didn't contact you before the meeting. Councilman Padragula, did you have any that needed to be pulled?
Thank you, no.
Nothing to be pulled? Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Move approval on remaining items.
We got a motion by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any discussion? Michaela?
So I normally don't do this, but I just want to make sure that, so item 6.5 and 6.6 are both alcohol licenses. 6.6 does have dates on them. I just wanted to clarify 6.5 doesn't because they're in the process of closing. So you're approving the license, but I won't issue it until they close on the sale of the property, so.
If there's no further discussion, please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on, along on the agenda, action item number 7, 7.1, potential sale of land, city land, North Minot Addition, 4836. What are the wishes of the council?
I'd move approval on all the staff recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion by Lisa, second by Mark. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none on 7.1, please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to item 7.2 in the agenda, traffic control yield to stop conversions. What are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor.
We have a motion by Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Paul. Is there any discussion?
Could, Stefan come up?
Harry?
Can I get
Recognized.
Stefan for a question? Sorry. So I know that there's research done behind this. Just give us a brief overview of the like, this is a large amount of transitions from yield to, so tell us your process behind it.
Mayor, members of council, this ordinance really started with our region sign replacement. So per the MUTCD, which is rules we have to go by, we have to have traffic control signage, stops, yields, maintain a minimum amount of retroreflectivity, basically your light bouncing off of it. We replace our signs on a 10-year rotation, so the city is grouped out into 10 different parts. The bulk of these signs are in Region 2 is what it's called. So we are in the process of replacing these yield signs. So we took the extra step to see if, does this meet our ordinance and the site triangle observation that you need to see. And all these, I think it's 27 intersections, there's an obstruction in the way of a yield sign, so we recommend converting it to a stop sign. Hopefully that answers your question.
And if this is approved, like, is this next week? Like, what is the timeline for these swap outs?
It'll be about a month or two. We still have to wait for material to get here. And
Okay.
then the process of doing all that work too.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, Stefan? Thank you, sir. Any further discussion on item 7.2? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Moving on to item 7.3 in the agenda, that is the Minot Committee on Child Care Report and Recommendations. Do we just go right to the report? Would that be proper? Go right into the, so I'll turn it over at this time to Alderman Burlingame for his report.
All right, well, first off, I'd like to start by thanking all the members of the committee. Their names are in the white page paper. I forgot Ryan Kuhn, and I'd like to apologize for her. She calls me and wondered if she got kicked off the committee, and I just copied and pasted wrong. So, but through a comprehensive exploration comprising of 16 meetings, the committee engaged stakeholders from early childhood licensing providers, employers, and parents to uncover the persistent challenges regarding childcare. The problems that we saw were things like staff shortages, information gaps hindering potential providers, and daunting economic barriers that really produced real obstacles for the quest to solve the local childhood crisis. Throughout our process, and again in the white papers that are part of your packet, we really developed 6 kind of areas for strategic recommendations that include subject matter experts or people, that we need experts on this, information, grants, including economic development funding, tax breaks or tax incentives, especially for commercial facilities, buildings and space problems, and then startup or staffing costs, which can include everything from background checks to CPR, first aid, things like that. As we begin the discussion of this, I want to address a few things and just make sure that this is established. The role of the city in this crisis is limited. We have limited tools and limited resources. Nobody on the committee is looking that the city should solve this problem alone or go ahead going forward. That does not mean that we shouldn't do nothing. The city can and should show leadership in these areas. We can work hard to create an environment that brings stakeholders together. The city can make use of stagnant and underutilized tools and resources to provide some assistance. Within the recommendations, you'll find a profound commitment to fostering an environment where as child care providers thrive, families flourish, and we see economic growth within our city. So with that, I guess I will, you guys have had a chance to look at the recommendations. I will open it up for questions.
Are there any questions of Scott? Any questions? Steve?
I guess just a comment. I wanted to compliment you, Scott, and the members of the committee on taking a very careful and reasoned look at this. I mean, this issue keeps coming up every few years, and in the time I've been around, I think this is the most comprehensive and most realistic attempt we've made as a city to look at these issues. I think you're right. Our scope is somewhat limited and our resources certainly are limited, but I don't think that's an excuse for not doing anything. I mean, our citizens have identified this individually and collectively as a significant need. The business community has identified this as a major factor in inhibiting our growth as a community. Our city development staff, MAC, EDC, you name it, they've all identified this as an issue. Thankfully, some movement is happening, starting to happen perhaps at the state level, and I think many of the issues, particularly in terms of funding and trying to achieve some sort of realistic pay salary levels for staff, will, I think, have to wait for and depend on support at the state level. But I think this is an issue that more and more people are agreeing we need to start facing as a society, and we need to do what we can locally, again, realizing that our resources are limited. But I wanted to compliment you and your committee for the very good job they did in identifying what the key issues are out there, and even coming up with some data information in addition to the informed speculation many of us have engaged in for many, many years. I think this is a very good foundation. Now it's a matter of trying to achieve some sort of consensus on what we should do and how much we should spend. But again, this is a very good start. I think I'm very pleased and impressed with what the committee did.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments? Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, yeah, echo Alderman Patriagula's comments. Great work, but my question is, I guess, is what's next? Is this something that we're going to see come from staff with a recommendation? Is this something that the council will put something together, a recommendation, what we want to see happen? Is this something to be attached to the budgeting process? Just curious on where we go from here.
What I think the committee is really looking for is guidance from this council on what you guys would like to see as priorities, or what this, as a group would, in order to start giving it to staff. Because as you can see within the suggestions, there are quite a few there. A lot of them are pretty similar, and I tried to kind of merge them together when appropriate. But really, I mean, do we want to look at, we do nothing but provide some information, or do we want to look at some sort of making use of things like we talked about in there, like magic fund dollars or things like that? So really, we're looking for what's next from this group rather than us prioritizing. And I'll also yield to Alderwoman Olson if I spoke on that.
Lisa?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Well, again, I'll certainly echo the thanks to the committee, because this was a very thorough job done, that, we looked into a lot of different aspects of the childcare issues. And each week, there were more issues that came to the surface, and the impact that it has on our community is just really overwhelming, from families to schools to businesses. There's a huge impact. And I have to agree with Alderman Burlingame that I think we do have a role here. I think that we can take the lead. I'm very conscious right now that adding additional costs to the services that we provide is not something that's going to pass, and it's not even something that I'm recommending. But I do think that this council needs to look at some options of maybe reallocating some funds that could create a grant program that would allow for some building or renovations of buildings in order to create more openings or options for families who are looking for daycare, particularly for infants. That seemed to really kind of rise to the top, that care for infants is virtually impossible to find. So I think that would be a good place to have a conversation on whether or not there is an appetite for reallocating some funds.
Thank you, Lisa. Carrie?
So this is what I would suggest, is you have 6 areas. I mean, literally take each point and put like how we would do that and what would it cost. Like some of them don't cost anything, right? They're free. How would we do and like almost creating this a la carte menu, right? That, instead, you know what I mean? That like can be picking and then prioritizing that, like some of the things, like maybe giving it, like this one thing is going to really make a big impact. You know what I mean? A really big impact. This thing, it'll be helpful, but not going to make or break, sort of the crisis we're having. But that way, like, because some of this stuff wouldn't be in the city scope, right? Like like maybe you develop a childcare startup guide. Like, I don't know who would do that, right? If it'd be, but you know what I mean? Like having that as a separate, who would do that and, what that would cost. And, I mean, that would be helpful for me just to sort of see each point and a price tag attached and responsibility attached. So we see what is ours and what is somebody else's and what's not gonna, that would just need support of the city, but it won't cost money.
Sure.
Those are just my thoughts. I don't know how other people feel.
I think that's a good start. I think, coming back to the council with some actionable items. I wouldn't say you'd have to come back with a list of 6, but if you wanted to work on like the top one and bring it back at the next one, so you're not, you're not overloading the committee, and I don't know how long you want to have the committee continue for, but, I guess that's kind of a direction I would go.
And also, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Carrie.
And starting with the most, you guys know from being on the committee, right, which are the ones that are going to really jumpstart some things and get, the goals that you had of, helping with the childcare crisis. And so, even if those are the costliest ones, like, we have to start with what is going to be the most impactful, an incentive kind of thing, and then move on. I mean, that, just because it may cost money, it could be, an essential building block for the rest of the stuff. I don't know. I mean, you guys were in the weeds, so I would leave it to you guys to.
Mr. Mayor, if I may respond.
Yes, go ahead, Scott.
Of course, one of the harder things is, and maybe if you guys want to give us more direction, and Carrie, I appreciate the direction you're going, because that's kind of where my intention is as well, is do we want to look at, the catch-22 is that we heard examples when we were listening to and finding out what other communities around our region are doing. We heard examples where places are doing micro grants. Well, they're offering up, if a childcare needs a freezer, they can get a grant. Those tend to be, one of the suggestions were near, like, say, $2,000 or less, just very small amounts of money that can make a little bit of a difference. And then we heard about situations like Watford City, which, by the way, we are not doing this, but Watford City's invested like $26 million or something like that in building actual childcare facilities. And so there's everything in between that. So I guess just to even, if that's the way, if you just want to be like, here's the highest impact, here's, because the hard part, I guess, and I guess my question to you all is, what is the impact we want to make? Is it serving lots of people a little bit? Is it serving one big impact? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, what would you say the conclusion of the committee, like you guys identified the problem. Did the problem end up being what you thought it was going to be? Like that we just don't have enough childcare providers? That was sort of the generic way we went into it.
Yeah, obviously, yes. I think that we refined it down a little bit more to talk, as Alderwoman Olson did, about the issues with especially young children, like that being a really big issue. And the thing that probably surprised me more than I was expecting was just the problem with space. That the cost of space for providers and the economics of childcare is wonky. So when they're paying rent, it makes it hard to actually make enough money to pay your employees well, which when you can't pay your employees well, you can't hire employees. When you can't hire employees, you can't create childcare slots. So that was probably the biggest surprise that I had going into it. Not that I thought the economics of childcare was great, but that issue around space was very much an issue, so. Please.
Lisa.
Thank you. And I think another impact that really stuck home with me too is how it is impeding the growth of Minot. We heard from businesses, we heard from schools that families don't come to Minot because there's not childcare. They know that sometimes there's a 3 to 5 year waiting list in order to get a child in. And particularly in the energy business, we were reminded over and over again that families won't come here because there's not childcare. Well, that's hurting, a lot of it has a lot of economic issues. And so if there is better childcare and there's more options, I think we'll see growth within our community, which then, of course, just turns that dollar over and over and over again. So we can see a good outcome if we can make the initial investment.
Carrie.
So, sort of with that, so is it those two things? Is it like maybe identifying space issues? Like, I don't know if finding space, like I'm just doing the magic one and finding space, and then creating more, if we need more daycares for young kids, but we still are having a labor issue. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. We could throw $1 million into it if there's still not staff. So sort of honing in on those impediments, right? That is, one is, I think, the space, the paying, if they could have cheaper space or free space, they could pay their employees better and keep a more robust staff, which would be, mean more kids. But I don't, you know what I mean? I'm trying to unpack what like, there is no magic bullet. I think that's what you guys found. But what are the 2 or 3 things that really would, you know?
I think that one of the things we heard over and over again, and I really do think that, and I called it again in the report, subject matter experts, I think that the city economic development staff being dedicated to this issue can make a big difference. Because along with all of the information, we learn a lot about the things that the state's done, the things that lenders have done. But there is a problem getting that information from the people who have it to the people looking to start childcares or the people looking to expand childcares. And not only that, we heard about the fact that folks that are looking to do that may not necessarily know how to go about filling out those forms or how to go about getting that. So there's a certain amount of like economic coaching that is needed. And I think that's actually very important. That's something that maybe doesn't cost the city a whole lot of new money, but I think that is very much, and I think, Carrie, you mentioned something like a guide or something like that that is given to people. And I don't think that there's just a place for humans in this and really to work with people when they're trying to do that. I think that's one of those things that is very important that came up over and over again across the board. Yeah, Harold, did you have something to say? I saw you grabbing your mic earlier.
Yeah, this is, in my opinion, one of the things I've learned through this is it's kind of a chicken or the egg scenario. And in my opinion, yeah, space is an issue, but even if you create the space, what I learned was the bottleneck is access to trained, qualified staff to staff the daycares. The federal regulations and the state regulations that are required to work in this space are equivalent to basically getting a degree to be a teacher in an elementary school or a high school. And by the time you do that, if I have that degree and that education, that certification, and I'm going to choose between going to work for a daycare for almost minimum wage versus being a teacher or a paraprofessional and have benefits, I'm probably going to invest that education into the education system and not into daycare. So my opinion is, for me, what comes first is how we figure out a solution to create workforce in the daycare career field, working with Minot State, those kinds of things. How do we increase the wage rate for that? How do we provide benefits to this working class so that they're able and willing to work in this sphere? Otherwise, we can create space as much as we want, but if there's no one to staff it, the space does you no good because they can't occupy it or use it because they don't have the staff to support it.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Part of what Scott had said was that if there was sort of affordable space or subsidized space, right, they would be able, the thought is they could increase their wages for their employees and benefit packages or something like that as well. I mean, that it's just not a matter of more space, but that what that space would mean, especially if it was like public, you know what I mean, reduced cost space.
So for example, on that note, one of the other communities I looked at, and I apologize, I don't remember which one, it essentially granted a significant amount of money for a building, for space. But as a requirement of accepting that grant, they had to agree to pay their childcare providers, I think it was $20 an hour. Well, that's almost double what current childcare rate is. So that's the kind of thing where I think that by offering that, you create that incentive with the space to actually pay more to hopefully bring more people into the system. And to build off of what Harold said too, I want to make sure, at the workforce center in town now, there is, childcare that's being part of that new building up there. I think that's a good part of it, just continuing to get people thinking about childcare and giving those skills to folks at a young age. It doesn't mean there's not still more that can be done. And they're basically becoming a feeder for childcares, but I think so. There are things that exist now that didn't exist 2 years ago or 3 years ago here in our community, but it doesn't mean that there aren't more opportunities that can be done for that, for training up people and working with our education folks here in town to increase that. So, okay.
Any other, Carrie?
And just, I was thinking back to like those the information packets and stuff. Like, I have no idea what the capacity of city staff is, but that is even something that, a temporary contract position could, do, is some of these things, that if there's not an identified person within the city or the bandwidth, that bringing somebody in for 6 months to, pull together all these resources might be something, if it's going to help, the daycare providers, expand or do whatever they need to do if it's hindering their abilities.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Lisa.
I appreciate all of this conversation. I think a lot of this was happening at the committee level as well, too. I feel right now if we send it back to the committee, we're not giving them enough guidance, because this was essentially a year's worth of work put into this white paper. And so they've kind of tossed it to us. And in order to get a little more information out of them, I think we need to give them a little bit more specific guidance in what we're looking for.
So I wasn't proposing to send it back to the committee. I was proposing to send it to Scott, and that Scott having, no, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you're the chair, and you were the benefit of going to every meeting and hearing it all. And now, and then, you know, sort of having one leg in that committee and one leg with this governing body, being able now to prioritize for us. I mean, that was my thought. I mean, the committee just seems really onerous to take this all back to. I don't know. I mean, you're the chair of the committee, so.
I mean, if that's what you guys want me to do, I'll definitely come back with some more, you know, and I'll work with city staff as well to find out some approximate values, what I'm thinking if this works for you guys is almost like here's why we can do this, and here's the barriers we're gonna see if we choose that. Because with each one of these, there's potential risks and rewards, or I don't know what the right words are here, but I can definitely work through that and come back with a suggestion.
Is there any objection to Carrie's thought?
And please,
Well, of
you
course,
guys,
having Lisa, you know what, I'm not volunteering you, but you know what I mean? You two really were in the trenches with this, so.
Does that provide you enough, some direction, Scott?
I think so.
Okay. Are we satisfied as a council to move forward?
Lisa,
Okay.
does that help if it's just the two of you? Okay, good.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Scott. And that was, congrats, nice job on the white paper, and a big thank you to the entire committee. That was a lot of work put into that white paper, so thank you so much. Now moving on to item number 8, which is personal appearances. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to address the council to come forward. I would ask that out of respect for those who all wish to speak, if you could limit your comments to 5 minutes. I think there's a switch on the microphone you'll have to turn on.
Mayor Ross, council members. In November 2023, before I addressed the lectern not meeting ADA requirements, at the top of the city council notes was that one is to call the city clerk for special requests. ADA compliance is not a special request, it's a requirement. December 4, I shared that North Dakota Protection and Advocacy said a table with a microphone would meet compliance for the lectern. January 29th, the plastic folding table and microphone was to the right of the podium, unable to see all council members. February 1st, Leif Snyder addressed on the January 31 Independent Ink post that addressed a meeting with Mayor Ross addressing accessibility, that the podium at City Hall not meeting ADA compliance would be a good place to start. February 5th, Harold Stewart stated that the podium was accessible because it goes up and down. However, it does not for a person to sit or stand, only to stand. The plastic folding table did not do that, nor would the microphone that's at the table. It's appalling that city staff are saying what is, not defining what ADA compliance is. February 12th, a standard office desk that goes up and down, this one, replaced the plastic folding table 8 months after City Hall opened in May 9th. In May, 9 months after I addressed the podium not being ADA compliant in April, this desk is in almost all of the offices for almost all of the staff to sit or stand. However, for the public where ADA compliance is a requirement, not a reasonable accommodation, the podium was not planned or designed to meet ADA compliance. This standard office desk provided to the right of the podium, one cannot see all council members. March 4 at the city council meeting, Mayor Ross, you spoke louder than I've ever heard, reading an email from Kyle Erickson. Both you and Kyle were at the Independent Inc. meeting hosted by Alderman Scott Burlingame, Director of Independent Inc. Kyle stated that a table meets ADA compliance for the podium. He also stated that making changes to the podium would be costly. He is also in a wheelchair. This meeting was to address snow removal and sidewalks. I was told Alderman Scott Burlingame, Director of Independent Inc., had the organization do a walkthrough of the building before opening. The best that came of me having addressed the lectern not meeting ADA compliance was nothing. Alderman Padragula stated that the design standards called for the building to be fully accessible, that he would have the trust that the architects designed it that way. He also stated that at the special council retreat meeting that specifically talked about individuals who did not have a seat at the table, and it appears that people with accessibility issues are one of them, that was all agreed that we need to be more mindful of these individuals and groups, so concerns and complaints like mine should find a more receptive audience as time goes on. Alderman Padragula also said there is more to be concerned about concerning the disabled other than physical disabilities. Alderman Padragula also stated because of our limited resources, the absence of a specific point person, Lance Mayer, the chief engineer coming the closest, and limited proactive efforts, we generally rely on citizens' input and complaints to make us aware of these sorts of issues. Mine were ignored. It took 8 months for a plastic folding table to be brought in next to the podium after addressing it in April 2023. It took 3 months for the temporary fix to be done on the north entrance door where the threshold did not meet ADA requirements for occupancy, with City Hall having been open for 8 months, and still there was no response if a permit was required for occupancy during that time, as it was called a sidewalk complaint by Lance Mayer, the chief engineer. A wise friend shared with me when discussing this that piss-poor planning creates piss-poor results, which has set us back decades, generations with a podium that resembles what water fountains look like for whites and coloreds in the 60s. The standard office desk next to the podium will be here until the next remodel of City Hall. Unless someone says we messed up here, this podium needs to be fixed. I would like it to be this city council that steps up, steps forward, as it is the city council that was here when it opened.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Continuing on with public appearances, now is the opportunity for those who wish to step forward and address the council. Seeing none, we will move on to action item 9, which is miscellaneous and discussion items. Action 9.1, consider the report to the Magic Fund Screening Committee. Finance Director Dave Lakefield will present.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Nelson was scheduled to be here this evening. I don't see him anywhere, so I can step in and answer any questions that you might have. He did provide a written report that was included in your packet that outlines the activity in the past year of the Magic Fund.
Are there any questions or comments from the council? Questions for Finance Director?
I would just
Go
like
ahead.
to highlight, and Mr. Nelson has it in his report as well, with the recent update of the Magic Fund guidelines that we're working through the changes there to get those all out so everybody knows exactly where we're at with things. And it'll be a little bit of an educational process going forward too.
Seeing no comments or questions, thank you, Dave. Moving on to item 9.2, the 2023 Citizen Satisfaction Survey Results Report and Presentation. Harold?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the council and public. So end of last year, beginning of this year, we conducted the second community satisfaction survey. We conducted the first one in 2021. This is an effort to try and assess how well we're providing the services to the public and receive some feedback from our citizens with regards to the services we provide, what are the priorities, where do we need to improve, what are we doing well, those kinds of things. And so we've contracted with the ETC Institute, who did the 2021 survey, as well as the 2023. So we have Mr. Jason Morato from the ETC Institute, who will provide his report on the findings from the survey and how some of this compares to what he's seen across the country with other communities that they do work for. And then when he's concluded and the council has no more further questions for him, I have a presentation prepared from a staff perspective of what we're seeing from this and how we plan to use it.
Great. Thanks, Harold. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Morato with ETC Institute. We are a marketing research firm that specializes in conducting community surveys for local governments. As Harold just mentioned, for the second time, we conducted a community survey for the city of Minot. So today I'm going to walk through the key findings from the survey. Just a little background about ETC Institute. We're based in the Kansas City area, but we're a national leader in providing market research for local governments. We've been doing this type of work for over 40 years. And in the last 10 years alone, we've conducted surveys in more than 1,000 communities across the country. So this is the type of work that we specialize in. This is just an overview of what I'll go through today. I'll go over the purpose and methodology of the survey. I'll walk through the key findings from the survey and then summarize our main takeaways. And then I'll be happy to answer any questions as well. So there are several reasons to conduct a survey like this. One is to get an objective assessment of how satisfied residents are with major city services and to determine what residents feel are the top priorities for the community. They were also able to measure trends from your previous survey and then also able to compare your results with other communities across the country. So this survey was 7 pages in length. It's a fairly long survey, but it is typical for community surveys. On average, it takes residents about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. The survey was administered by a combination of mail and online to randomly selected residents throughout the city. And that mail-online combination is our standard methodology for these types of community surveys. We had a good response. We ended up with 454 completed surveys. Our goal is to receive at least 400. And the results of the 454 surveys at the 95% level of confidence has a margin of error plus or minus 4.6%. Essentially, that means that if we conducted the survey the same way 100 times, 95 times the results would be plus or minus 4.6 from what we're reporting. So the statistically valid survey, but the margin of error is small. So here we have a map of the city. The red dots are households that completed a survey. And this distribution is similar to what we had on your last survey a couple of years ago. And as we were administering the survey, we made sure that the demographics of survey respondents reflect the actual population of the city. So here's what we learned from the survey. We found that the majority of survey respondents rated the city of Minot as an excellent or a good place to live and to raise children. You rated above the regional and the national average as a place to live and as to raise children. We'll look at that in more detail in just a little bit. We found that the top overall priorities for city services are maintaining city streets and sidewalks, traffic flow, enforcing codes and ordinances, and police services. And then we asked respondents, what are the top issues facing the city over the next 5 years? And the top issues that residents mentioned were high taxes, property taxes and finances, housing affordability, crime, and road repair, maintenance, and expansion. So first we'll look at overall satisfaction with city services. On this question, we asked residents how satisfied they are with major categories of city services. So in this question, we're asking residents to rate these areas at the big picture departmental level. And then later on in the survey, we asked about some more specific areas within some of these categories. So in this chart, you can see that the dark blue are residents who are very satisfied. The light blue is satisfied. The gray is neutral. And we interpret neutral as average or meeting expectations. It's a rating of a 3 on the 5-point scale. So it's not a bad rating, but just not as high of a rating as the areas in blue. And then the pink are those who are dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. So you can see that overall, the positive ratings far outweigh the negative. The highest rated areas are fire services, police, library, water and sewer, customer service, city employees. There are only 3 areas that had at least 25% of residents who were dissatisfied, and that was streets and sidewalks, codes and enforcement codes and ordinances, and traffic flow. And we also compared these results to your previous survey. This is that same question about major categories of city services. The dark blue are the satisfaction ratings for this year's survey, and the gray are the satisfaction ratings for your first survey back in 2021. So overall, the satisfaction ratings for major categories of services are similar this year to your previous survey, which is actually a good sign because most cities we've surveyed over the past year have had an overall decrease in satisfaction compared to where they were a couple of years ago. Now you can see there was one area that has significant decrease in satisfaction. That was enforcing codes and ordinances. The satisfaction went from 40% last time down to 33% this time. And then there was one area that has significant increase in satisfaction since 2021. Satisfaction with solid waste services was 60% in 2021. Now it's up to 70%. But in most areas, the satisfaction ratings are within a few percentage points where they were a couple of years ago. Now, here are the areas with among the biggest increases and decreases in satisfaction since your last survey in 2021. The biggest increases were related to the quality of social media, the overall quality of solid waste, efforts to inform residents about disruptions to their trash service, bulky item pickup and removal services, and adequate stormwater infrastructure. The biggest decreases compared to a couple of years ago were pedestrian accessibility, which on the survey we defined as sidewalk system for people with disabilities, the availability of shared use paths, such as walking and biking paths, Minot as a place to retire, enforcing codes and ordinances, and quality and animal control. We also compared your results to other communities. So for these next couple charts, the dark blue are Minot residents who are either very satisfied or satisfied. The light blue are the satisfaction ratings for residents in the Plains region, which includes the state of North Dakota as well as surrounding states. And then the gray bar are the satisfaction ratings for residents from all across the country. And this is based on a national survey that ETC Institute conducts with randomly selected residents nationwide every 1 to 2 years. So you can see there are several areas where your ratings are significantly above the regional national average, which is the blue arrows. That includes library services, solid waste service, customer service from city employees is one of the areas where you rate the farthest above the regional national average. You had a 60% satisfaction rating, and you can see the regional average is only 42%, national average is only 39%. And then water and sewer utilities is another area where you rate significantly above the regional and national average. Areas where you rate below the regional and national average are traffic flow, enforcing codes and ordinances, and public transportation. Streets and sidewalks is actually a little bit above the regional average, but then a little bit below the national average. So this chart is for quality of life in the city, general perceptions of the city. And you can see you rate significantly higher than other communities when it comes to Minot as a place to raise children, as a place to live, as a place to work. 71% of respondents feel Minot is an excellent place to raise children. The regional and national average are both around 60%. And then one of the areas on the survey where you rated the farthest above the regional and national average was as a place to live, where you had a 66% satisfaction rating. Regional and national average were both just under 50%. And then you did rate below the regional and national average as a place to visit and as a place to retire. So now we'll look at top priorities. We saw earlier how satisfied residents are with major categories of city services. As a follow-up question, we asked which of these services should receive the most emphasis. So in other words, which are the most important for the city to provide? The top two priorities were maintaining streets and sidewalks and police services. Other high priorities include fire services, water and sewer utilities, and traffic flow. Now, this is something we call the important satisfaction rating. This analysis is based on two different types of data, which we've seen already. First, we ask residents how satisfied they are with services, and then we ask which services are the most important for the city to provide. So the idea behind this is that those services that have a combination of low satisfaction ratings, but at the same time are the most important, should be the highest priorities to focus on. So the areas in pink are the highest priority, the area in yellow are the next level of priority, and then the green are the lower priorities. Now, this doesn't mean that the areas in green don't need any attention, but making improvements to areas in pink and yellow will impact the greatest number of residents. So this first table is for major categories of city services. The top priorities are maintaining city streets and sidewalks and traffic flow. And then other high priorities, which are listed in yellow, are enforcing codes and ordinances, police services, water and sewer utilities, and public transportation. These are the top priorities for maintenance and public works items. The top two priorities are just the overall condition of major city streets and snow removal on neighborhood streets. Other high priorities include snow removal on major city streets, traffic flow on major city streets, the timing of traffic signals, and then the condition of neighborhood streets. These are the top priorities related to public safety. The top priority is just overall efforts to prevent crime. Other high priorities include the overall quality of police protection and then the visibility of police in neighborhoods. How quickly police officers respond to emergencies, that's the highest among the medium priority items. It just missed being in the yellow section. And then for code enforcement, the highest priorities were the cleanup of trash and litter on commercial properties, as well as on residential properties. There were 7 items here, but those were the 2 that really stood out. So some other findings. We asked residents where they currently get information about the city. You can see the top sources of information are the city's Facebook page, local TV news stations, and then the city's website. The other top sources of information were the local newspaper and city council meetings. As a follow-up question, we asked, which of these sources do you most prefer to use to get information about the city? So in the previous chart, we're looking at how do residents currently get information. Now we're asking, what are your most preferred ways? And the way residents most prefer to get information really does align with the way they're currently learning about the city. And that includes the city's Facebook pages, the city's website, local TV stations are the top 3. And then we asked respondents, what do they feel are the biggest issues that the city of Minot will face within the next 5 years? You can see the top choices were high taxes, property taxes and finances, affordable housing, and that's been a high priority on just about every survey we've conducted over the past year or 2. Crime, which is always a high priority in any community, and then road repair, maintenance, and expansion. So that's everything that I had. Just a quick recap. We saw that the majority of respondents feel that Minot's an excellent or a good place to live and raise children. He rated much higher than other communities in those areas. The top overall priorities for city services are maintaining city streets and sidewalks, traffic flow, enforcing codes and ordinances, and police services. And then the top issues facing Minot over the next 5 years are high taxes, property taxes and finances, housing affordability, crime, and road repair, maintenance, and expansion. So with that, does anyone have any questions?
Do we have any questions of Mr. Murato? Any questions?
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead. Harold?
Mr. Murato, you and I have talked about this before. So a lot of the satisfaction rates from the 2023 were down compared to 2021. How does that compare to other communities that you've been doing survey work? Is that common, uncommon? What are you seeing this year as you're doing surveys across the country?
Yes, overall, the satisfaction ratings this year are lower than they were in 2021. But that was not a surprise at all because that's a trend we've seen all over the country, especially over the past year. And it's really been nationwide on just about any type of community we've surveyed, whether it be large cities, small cities, rural, urban, East Coast, West Coast. There's definitely been a significant overall decrease in satisfaction this year compared to the last couple of years. So there was an overall decrease in satisfaction compared to your 2021 survey, but that was to be expected.
Continue.
Follow up. Yep. So knowing that's a national trend throughout, was our decrease of satisfaction, was that equal to or less than the decrease in satisfaction across the rest of the country?
I would say overall it's probably comparable to other parts of the country. Although one thing I noted was that when you looked at the major categories of city services, there wasn't much of an overall decrease in that. There's really more in some kind of specific pockets here and there throughout the survey. So if you look at overall decrease in satisfaction, probably similar to what we see in other communities. But when you look at those major categories of city services, where we're asking residents to rate the services at the big picture departmental level, there the ratings were very similar to 2021. So those ratings were not down really compared to 2021. So there you fared better than other communities.
Any other questions? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. So, Mr. Murato, when people were answering the questions, were the questions pre-populated or were they given an area to put in a comment? Because obviously property taxes was very high on the list of concerns for our residents. So was that a question that just was asked, or was it, what are your concerns, and that's something that really rose to the top?
No, there was one question at the very end that was open-ended where we gave residents to essentially address anything they wanted to. But otherwise, the survey included responses that residents could choose from. So that was one of the options on that question you're talking about the issues. That question had 8 different options they could choose from, but then there was an option for other if somebody wanted to write something in that wasn't included on the list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Any other? Steph?
I have a question, Mr. Murato, about the results of the enforcement of city codes and ordinances. Is there anything in your survey that tells you, that narrows down why that would be the case? One of the things I'm plugged into Dias 7, if our public information officer could share my screen. One of the items that I share in my city attorney report each month are our annual case totals. And since 2022, we've cited more people to municipal court. So it's not for lack of issuing citations and seeing people in court. It looks like 2024, we're up another 100 plus citations issued from last year even too. So is there anything that you have in your research that explains in more detail why the dissatisfaction with enforcement of city codes?
Really, we had the question where we asked about the important satisfaction table, where we asked about 7 different aspects of code enforcement. It didn't get super specific, but we asked about cleanup of trash and litter on commercial properties, cleanup of trash and litter on residential property, maintaining residential property, parking enforcement on neighborhood streets. Now we also, for those results, broke the results out by census block group. So you can see on a map if there are certain pockets of the city where residents are more satisfied or less satisfied with different aspects. So that's a way to look a little deeper at the data. But of course, this survey, the entire thing is residents' perceptions. The perceptions might not be the same as some of the data you're showing here.
Any other questions? Mr. Morato, just a question on the information and how you obtained the information. You said it was mail, online, and phone interviews. Is that correct?
Just mail and online, not phone interviews. So we mailed the survey out. Then the mailed survey also had a link to an online version of the survey. So residents had the option of either filling out the print survey, mailing it back to us, or taking the survey online.
Okay. Do you have a percentage of what was mailed back and what was conducted online?
I can double check on that. Typically, it's pretty close to 50-50, usually skewing a little more towards online. But I can double check and find what those numbers were.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Steve?
Just a comment as last time, I was impressed with the methodology. I have professional training in that area. Obviously, none of my business is yours is primarily, but the way you went about this I thought was very good. And I think it gives us, as they would say in the military field, actionable intelligence. We have some specific things that we I think, need to be focusing on. There's some things we don't need to be worrying about so much, and maybe we should leave well enough alone. But I think it gives us an idea of specific kinds of things we can focus on. I read through the comments. I read through every single comment that people filled out, and that gave a nice impressionistic and I think a subjective feel in addition to the numbers. The numbers I think are really critical, but I think when you read those comments, I think you get a sense of some of the enforcement issues, for example. People tend to pay attention, I think, to their neighborhoods, to streets that they use to get to work, to intersections that they have problems with, things like that. So when I look through those comments, I don't know, 400, how many ever there were, it really gave me a better understanding of what the numbers meant. So, as a member of the governing body, as a decision maker, I think this is exactly the kind of stuff we should be having, and I really appreciate the time and effort you put into it, and I would like us very much to put this in our next 2-year budget. I think it's absolutely critical we keep track of this stuff and do it on an objective basis, not just what people complain about or what we hear in the locker room or at the grocery store. I think we need to have these kinds of numbers and the ability to compare to other communities in our region and to compare to ourselves a few years ago and even nationally is very, very enlightening. We need to have that kind of perspective. So I really appreciate what you did, and it really will help me out. Thank you.
Anything further? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Morato, for your input and your work.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Moving on, Harold?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just to provide some staff perspective, what we've gleaned from some of this, a lot of it's going to be pretty similar to what Mr. Morato outlined as well. And as soon as the PowerPoint presentation comes up on the screens, I'll continue talking. So what we wanted to do is we want to take some of the data and some of the statistics and tell a little bit of the story of what we're seeing from staff and how it matches up. So here's an example of some outreach that we had from a citizen with regards to traffic lights here in town, and some of the staff response there as our public information office does a good job of monitoring these comments and trying to respond in a timely fashion and bringing in the necessary input from staff. And I believe this one, we turned around a pretty quick response with regards to contacting the city engineer's office and our traffic engineer, who do a good job of responding back. And even though we may not always be giving the answer that somebody wants to hear or fixing the problem immediately, at least they know they're getting a response and they understand how it's worked into the plan and potentially how they can engage with staff or the council to further prioritize those plans going forward. So It's important. We're trying to find more ways to engage with the public. Obviously, the traditional ways are still valuable. You can come into City Hall in person, or you can call us on the phone. But we also have ways of being able to communicate via social media and our website and those kinds of things, including a city app where people can report concerns and that kind of stuff, and staff can follow through. So going down here, and we're just going to kind of go through the different council aspirations here. First one being dynamic and flourishing. And here we have some, the upper two bars of the light blue and the yellowish tan are the survey results from 2021 and 2023. And then the darker olivish color is the regional, and then the darker orange is the national comparisons. So downtown quality, we're doing very well. We just, here's again a picture of city staff receiving the Governor's Award here with regards to the Downtown Facade Improvement Program. We've seen significant improvement as a place to live, at least compared to regional and national. A place to visit, that's an area that we've always struggled. That again stresses our importance of our partnership with Visit Minot and our Visitors Bureau. And then as a place to raise kids, we continue to improve in that area and are well above the national average. With regards to being resilient and prepared, we've spent a significant amount of attention over the years since 2011 with regards to flood protection. We continue to see improved satisfaction with regards to that in our efforts and our plan going forward, as well as stormwater, some significant infrastructure projects that we've had here over the last couple of years with the lead of our engineering office in identifying these areas. Our street superintendent, Kevin Broughton, also shared some great examples over here on the right. It might be kind of hard to see some of these pictures, but here's some examples of some stormwater improvements that we've made, some pictures of our flood control projects, all these kinds of things that are going into place to protect and provide better service regarding resiliency and preparedness for the future. Obviously, with street condition, that's a topic that we've been discussing for several years. We've tried to increase funding into that, and later on in the budget process, you'll hear once again the presentation from our city engineer with regards to what we're investing into maintenance of our streets, what's needed to be able to continue to improve in that area, and then staff will work with council on the final budget of what we can afford to continue to invest in that area. We continue to work on sidewalks, improve sidewalks. Any street project right now, there's a full ADA compliance process that we go through and putting in ADA ramps. And then the council dedicated funding to help with removal of snow off the sidewalks after significant snow events, particularly on city-owned sidewalks. So that was in direct response to the 2021 survey, trying to improve in that area. Safe and welcoming is, again, going through the comparisons here. Again, to reiterate, we've always known that trying to get visitors to Minot has been a challenge, continues to justify our efforts in that area. Fire friendliness, our fire department does a great job, our police department does a great job being out interacting with the public. And that has received high response and praise from the citizens in the survey. As far as a place to walk in the daytime, we saw a little bit of a decrease from the 2021 to the 2023, not significant, but a little bit of a decrease, but well above the national average. For the most part, we're a very pedestrian active community with a lot of people out walking, even in the winter times, and we're well above the national average as far as safety on that. And then walking after dark is another comparison point, but that's an area that we still have improvement and an effort that we continue to discuss and work on. The final aspiration is excellent and connected. So here we have the flow of traffic. We did see an improvement from the 2021 to the 2023 survey, but we're still well behind the regional and the national averages there. Again, that goes back to our conversation about it. Efforts and improvements in intersections. This is why we have a full-time traffic engineer on staff who does a great job. You had even an action on tonight's council of upgrading intersections with stop signs and those kinds of things. All those are parts and pieces to making strides and efforts in improving the flow of traffic within our community. Solid waste saw a huge improvement. I think the main difference here is the implementation of our recycling efforts since the 2021 survey to the 2023. I think that has gone off very well and is reflected in the citizen satisfaction surveys, as well as the fact that we just have great crews out doing waste collection, whether that's the weekly collections or the twice a year bulk collections. There's a lot of service there that the city provides. And I think those investments contribute to why we continue to perform better here than the regional or the national results. Water and sewer, we do well. I think those will improve even further once we have NOS fully online and have that better quality surface water coming in versus the mineral-rich aquifer wells providing water. And while we continue to strive and connect better with the community through all avenues, we are seeing great success on social media that's been well received. And as you saw in the presentation from Mr. Rado, is a trusted and an expected source of information and communication. And so it's great to see that significant increase in satisfaction that we're doing it right and we're connecting well. And as long as we maintain that, hopefully those numbers continue to improve. Also under Excellent Connected, obviously we're talking about, property taxes and tax burdens and all those kinds of things. We just wanted to provide a reminder here of where the sales tax money is going, how the property tax is distributed, how much of property tax the city is versus our other taxing entities within our community, that being the Minot Parks, Ward County, and the Minot Public Schools. And then as you saw in the presentation from our finance director here earlier, there's that schematic again showing the mill levy and the collection history over time. Again, pointing out that since 2019, staff and council have worked hard to hold that mill levy and either held it flat or lowered that mill levy over the last several years. Continuing on with this, and this is one of the areas that I was a little surprised by a little bit. 2023 was a pretty banner year for the community of Minot. Over to the left is some pictures of some of the highlights that we've had of progress within our community. Second high school being approved, a state-of-the-art hospital that's been opened, new city hall, Fire Station 5, the Discovery Center, new facade improvement program, many businesses being opened within our community. Probably a pretty historic year progressively for our community, and yet here within our satisfaction survey, we have 42% of our survey people telling us that we're headed the wrong direction. And I think what that means, in my opinion, is that we need to do a better job of telling our story of what we're doing and the differences that those are making. So hopefully the public understands that and knows where we're going and why. City staff took a lot of the comments and we created one of these word clouds to kind of show the high things that we're seeing out of the commentary as a response to the survey. And then we kind of clean that up a little bit and categorize that. And here's the big ones, which again is probably not a huge surprise: public safety, code enforcement, taxes, streets, snow removal, those kinds of things. Continue to be things that are on our radar, and staff is preparing to discuss further with council as we go into the fiscal year 2025 budget. And we'll work on telling our story better in this fiscal year of the projects that we have going on that are focused on those items and the efforts we're making to improve in those areas. Going in specifically to some of the specific departments, code enforcement, we already talked about that pretty extensively tonight, so I don't know that I'm going to spend a lot more time on this. But just continue to reiterate the importance. Again, this is the second survey in a row where the citizens have told us that it's a priority that we improve in code enforcement. City streets, we've also talked about this, traffic flow, shared use paths. Interestingly enough, on shared use paths, it was 50-50. We had half the citizens telling us that we needed to improve and invest more in shared use paths, and we had 50% of our citizens telling us that that was a waste of money and we shouldn't be spending any money in that area. So that was an interesting result there. Snow removal, now that we're winding up the winter season, city staff will have a meeting to reassess snow removal and our efforts and what solutions or resources may be needed to continue to improve in this area, and particularly trying to get to neighborhoods faster. And then street conditions, you'll have a presentation again from the city engineer's office with regards to our pavement management indexing study, what that's telling us, where we've been investing funds and where those recommendations are for future investments. And then over on the far right is a picture of our app, and just a reminder to the public that through that app, that is another way that you can communicate with city staff. You report potholes, report concerns, those kinds of things. We do monitor those, we do watch those, and we do respond to those. Street priorities, we created another word cloud here with regards to street priorities specifically. Top 3 comments being potholes, snow removal, and fixing roads. In the public safety area, just some areas to highlight here, some things that maybe we need to pay attention to going forward. How quickly PD responds. We did see improvement in this area from the 2021 to 2023. So I think this has been a goal and objective of Chief Klug and his staff, and they've done a good job. At least that's what it reflects in the survey. Traffic law enforcement, maybe something to talk about going forward, especially when we're a little bit behind the regional and somewhat on par with national, but a little bit behind. Fire safety education, again, this is a bright star. Our fire department does a great job in fire safety education, well above the regional national averages. And even though we saw a slight decline, it's pretty minimal and pretty much equal to the 2021. And then in the PD education systems, crime prevention, those kinds of things, again, above the regional national averages. We saw a little bit of a decrease from the 2021 to the 2023, but an area that we can continue to pay attention to. As far as fiscal responsibility, public decision-making, involvement of the public with regards to decisions that we're making, listening to the citizens. We don't have, this isn't a common question in the survey, so we don't have any regional or national comparison data for this one. This is one that we built specifically into the city of Minot's survey, so we could get some response here. And again, hoping to improve in those areas going forward. And again, I think we need to continue to tell our story. A lot of the challenges with regards to property tax is, in my opinion, and we'll have the housing study final report coming back to the council at the next meeting. Again, as I showed in the previous slide, the city's been holding the mill levy. We haven't been trying to raise property taxes. But when you have a supply-demand issue that we're having, and again, Mr. Murato talked about that across the country. This is a common conversation across the country. North Dakota and Minot is not the only one seeing this. But when you have low supply and high demand, people are willing to pay more for a piece of property. What people are paying for commercial properties and residential properties in Minot now compared to 10 years ago is significantly higher. And that's part of that equation in the property tax. So while we're controlling one piece of that equation, the market is controlling that other one and continues to push that up. We also continue to see pressures of inflation and workforce issues and those kinds of things going forward. We continue to try to meet the needs with regards to NAWS and flood protection, and still trying to be responsive to the public with regards to the burden of taxes going forward. And I thought we had a video here. I don't know, Jennifer, do you have that to play? Or did we delete that from the presentation? It's not in my version of the slide. So while she's pulling that up here real quick, yeah, go ahead and play the video. This is from the State of the City address. It's playing, we don't have any audio yet. While she's working on that for technical difficulties, just the final slide here before questions, just a brief summary. The things that the staff is going to focus on in the 2025 budget is fiscal responsibility, code enforcement, city streets, and public safety. well, not having the audio, I'll just summarize what I say in that, and I'll try to be hopefully as eloquent as I was a couple months ago. But basically, my commitment, so part of my responsibility by ordinance is to provide a city manager recommended budget to the council for their consideration. So I plan on preparing a city manager recommended budget that will include no increase to property tax. Not just the mill levy, but taking what the revenues are that we receive off of property tax and holding that flat for consideration in the 2025 budget. So that's going to be a difficult job for city staff to do as I work with the management team and our city staff to be able to accomplish that. Again, we're seeing increases in inflation and those kinds of things, including in projects like NAS and flood control that are important to keep moving forward. And as our finance director presented earlier, a large chunk of our budget is our people, our assets, in wages and benefits and those kinds of things. And so as we tighten our belts and figure out a way to do that, there's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made. But that's my commitment to the council and to the public, is that my recommended budget this year will not include a property tax increase in any shape or form. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Any questions of Harold? Steve?
It's kind of a fine point, but on page 5 of the objectives, where you go through the satisfaction ratings for us versus other cities, screen is black. The one that we were lowest in was nighttime safety, in terms of how safe people feel comfortable, how comfortable people feel walking around after dark. That was significantly lower than national or regional numbers. Do you have any idea of what that might be about?
Well, if I remember right from the survey, a lot of that was in our commercial areas. And so, you know, our officers are pretty busy. We're responding to calls and those kinds of things. We don't
That's what I mean.
invest a lot of resources just kind of patrolling around those commercial areas in the evenings. So my opinion, I mean, I've lived a lot of places, Los Angeles, California, Kansas City, Fort Worth, Dallas area. I definitely feel a lot safer walking around at night here in Minot than I would in a lot of those communities.
Same here.
But, you know, that's the results from the survey, and that's how people are feeling. That's their perspective, that's their perception.
I was puzzled by that because that's my own impression. I feel very safe here, and I'm wondering if maybe it's lighting too, to some extent, because we have a lot of really dark streets. You know, in more recent developments, developers are obligated to put up streetlights, but in the older parts of town, residential and commercial, there's no requirement, and they're pretty dark. And maybe some of it is the tripping hazard from sidewalks that haven't been maintained. But I was really struggling with that because it's very different from what my subjective perception is. The other issue, the other thing I'd say when you do your after winter action review with the staff is I continue to experience problems downtown with snow removal. And I know it's something that's been an issue for decades. But if you could focus on that, I was particularly appalled a few weeks ago where I saw a person in a wheelchair in the middle of the street. It was starting to get dusky, and I was very worried that they might get run over. They couldn't use their wheelchair on the sidewalk. And that's something the merchants and the people who live downtown complain about. And again, we're kind of constrained by space, but maybe that's something we need to kick up in terms of our priority for snow removal. Right now, I think it's last on all the plans. Maybe we need to kick that up a notch. But that was the one thing I noticed in terms of satisfaction with streets and snow removal. I think we have done a much better job, though, with city-owned sidewalks and walkways and stairways. But the downtown, I think, needs to get a closer look at it. But anyway, I think the results you're talking about here are generally consistent with what the consultant suggested, my own impressions with that one exception. So I'm pleased that you're giving us this kind of feedback and these kinds of numbers.
And if any of the council has any further feedback of things that they see in the survey results that they want to make a priority that fits underneath your aspirations, the sooner you can provide that feedback to city staff, the sooner we can begin preparing to have those conversations with you as part of the budget process as we put together the 2025 budget.
Anything further? Seeing none, we will move on to item 9.3 on miscellaneous and discussion. That is the TIP 411 introduction. Chief Klug. Chief, it's all yours.
All right, I'm gonna see if I can do this in record time. I'd say we saved the best for last, but I'll leave that for Alderman Pittner and item number 10. So just a quick introduction to TIP 411. This has been, we're probably one of the last communities, but I didn't think at the time this was released and by a lot of counties in 2020, 21, that it was the right time for us. So TIP 411 is a service that's provided that helps, I guess, screen that information to make sure it's anonymous when it arrives at our desk. So people can be assured that if they're using TIP 411, if they use our platform, and you can see on the left, T did a little work earlier today to show how the app would work. You can use this on an online, on a web-based, app-based. So if you type in Minot PD, you'll see the patch pop up in your, whether you go through the App Store or Google Play. You download that app. It takes about less than 5 minutes to set up your account. Even if you set up your account, that information won't arrive at our desk. That stays within the system at TIP 411 level. And that will allow you to use all of the services. One of the key notes that I would make is the 847-411, if you have that in your phone and you're anywhere in North Dakota, if you use Ward ND, that'll get you the sheriff's office. If you use Cass ND, that would get you Cass County Sheriff's Office. For Minot PD, it's when you start your message under that text number, you just start with Minot PD. It makes sure it comes to us. If you're in Mandan, you can use Mandan PD, so on and so forth. So this service was implemented pretty much statewide, different people at different times, but it just gives us one more way to connect with people, give them an anonymous way to report crime to us. It's not monitored 24/7, so if it is an emergency, we would ask that they call dispatch or call 911, but we are, I think, better equipped now to handle this type of service and additional tip information than we were a few years ago. So I would stand for any question.
Do we have any questions? Carrie?
What happens if I don't put in Minot PD? Like, I just like text and I put like, here's my tip.
If there's anything in there, Alderwoman Evans, if there's anything in that text that would indicate that it's Minot, it will eventually get to us. It'll just slow down that process. They do have people that monitor those messages out TIP 411. So even prior to now, there have been messages that have gone through that have included information about Minot.
So if
And
I
those-
said something like maybe
those messages
Burdick
have-
Expressway or something, you know what I mean? Somebody would be like that.
It may get to us, yes.
Okay. But we hope people put Minot PD so that it gets to you as quickly as possible.
And Mayor and council members, the other service that this does allow us, if people are signed up for TIP 411, we can reverse that as well. You can opt into business notifications and I believe it's police notifications, but it gives you that option to opt in. Also, we can respond back and we can request more information from a person unless they choose to not allow that at the time they submit the tip. So if they submit it, they're gonna get a message back and it'll say select or enter stop if you don't wanna receive any feedback. If they do that, we can't talk to them, but otherwise we'd be able to have some interaction with them without us knowing who they are.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
You
Carrie.
said like if I opt in for tip, like what is that? Tell me about that.
If, are you questioning the
No,
other part
like
that I'm
what kind of
asking
information would I get? Like, 'cause let's say I want to opt in for, would you say updates or alerts or
Yep.
something?
So, Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, you would receive any messages that we want to get to a business. So if we have a message just to, maybe it was downtown and we wanted to tell them, make sure your sidewalks are shoveled. We could do that through that platform.
Okay.
So if they were a business, they could sign up for that or opt into that so they would know what we're messaging. Same thing with just community members. They can just opt in and anybody signed up would get that messaging. I don't see us using that as a way to communicate emergency information necessarily, because it's going to depend on people signing up for the service. But if we have that big of a following on there, it could be useful in an
Like I'm
emergency
thinking
as
like
well.
for, like downtown, for instance, like I know it's been a problem that for snow removal, right, the cars are still parked, right? Like, you know, if you sign up, you would like get alerted, like, hey, remember, streets are being plowed tonight downtown, get your cars, you know, in the garage or whatever. Like, you know, would be helpful, because then otherwise you guys have to go out and do all that, and then we just don't get it plowed if there's a car there.
Right.
Scott?
Chief, how does the information work for lack of a better term, I guess, evidentiary? Can you take these tips you use and use them towards, like, say, search warrants if necessary and stuff like that? Is that allowable?
And Mr. Mayor, Alderman Burlingame, so you can use that information. Usually you have to corroborate it through some other method. So we can say we received an anonymous tip and we followed up and found these other things that corroborated that information. We can then use that if we need to. It's part of an investigation, so it's just one more tip that we can include in that.
Potentially, you could help trigger that, at least at an initial process. So if there is some crime activity in my neighborhood and I'm texting this number, it would at least bring your
Correct.
attention to it.
That's a lot of time what we find is it's a matter of somebody reporting it to us so that we can investigate. A lot of times it's a citizen might think, well, this is happening and we see it, so it's obvious. But I think the biggest part for law enforcement is if we have 7 officers out, they can only be in 7 places. But if we have 50 people in the community that are willing to text a tip to us about a crime happening, that's 50 more sets of eyes that just report that to us, so.
Well, and occasionally in our jobs, we'll have constituents reach out to us that'll say, you know, hey, I live in X neighborhood, there's crime activity, and I've forwarded that out onto you in the past. But this would be an alternative, to be like, don't just talk to me, but rather talk to your neighbors and tell them to send tips in this way, especially if they're worried about anonymity in order to, you know, they don't want their lives upset further. So this would be a nice advantage to that, correct?
Correct.
I have one more question.
Paul?
I just had a question. Is it you say it may eventually get to us or will eventually get to us. Is it a third party? Like, what's the process that it goes through?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pittner, so yeah, it is a third party. So tip 411 monitors kind of behind the scenes, but the information will flow to us. If it has the Minot PD portion in there, it'll come right to us. Otherwise, it has to be vetted by tip 411 to get that information to us.
Then when it comes directly to you, do you have an officer on, is it an officer on duty? Is it someone in dispatch? Is it?
So we would have, typically we aren't going to use dispatch because they have so much to monitor already. So we have several people within our organization assigned, and that's why we say it might not be, don't use it for an emergency. We might not see it right away because it's going to take some of those people to be in the right place to get that.
So if I text like, Minot PD, Mark Janser has chickens in his backyard, they'll eventually get to it and take a look?
We would get to that
Okay.
the next day, maybe.
Just making sure.
That's how rumors start. Carrie, you had a question.
So other than your people and 411, so you'll have my number if I do the tip. Is it gonna go beyond that? Like if you have to go, like try and do a search warrant, you're not just saying I got a tip on 411, you're gonna have to put more specifics in there, right?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, we would not have your number. All we'll have is we received a tip, and then
Okay.
we'll have whatever additional information we can provide that we found in our investigation to get to a search warrant. So you're just going to be,
A
this
random-
information was anonymously provided, and then everything from there will be information we learned through an investigation.
Okay, good. I'm glad we said that.
Lisa?
All right, thank you. So that just made me think of something. People could put their information in there if they chose to, though, right?
They can add it.
Yeah,
If they want to say who they are, they can tell us who they are.
Scott?
Chief, can you, as I'm watching all this, can you attach photos? Is that possible? Like you could a text message?
Yes, there is a lot of capability there. So it'll have you enter where you're at, what you saw. You can attach photos, videos, pretty much anything. So if you're witnessing a crime and you want to, and you have a video of it, or you witnessed something and we made an arrest, you could provide it through there too, if we didn't already get in contact with you. So there's a lot of ways you can get information to us. Even the video or the photo could be anonymous.
So beyond talking to us, and I realize, most people in Minot are watching us right now, but for, just in case somebody misses tonight's meeting, how else are you gonna get this out to the members of the public? Maybe some of the folks that are, maybe worried about crime, how are you gonna push this out to people?
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, Alderman Burlingame, we will have a release pushed out tomorrow, so the media will have the information. We'll push more information on our Facebook page, through our social media, through the city's social media, and make sure that, I guess, any channel we have to get the information out, we'll push that information out and make it available.
I just have one more, I swear to God.
Carrie?
I swear to God. Okay, so where this has occurred in other states, there's been some privacy issues. I'm going to use Paul's example. Mark has chickens in his backyard. I climb over his fence to take a picture of that. I send that as a tip. Well, I've committed a crime by doing that. I've entered his private property. Right? Like, I'm just
Mr.
saying
Mayor,
that we.
Alderwoman Evans, I would refer that to the city attorney.
But I'm just saying, in states who have done this longer, there has been like sort of citizen police who are now violating laws to get that picture or that video.
Our platform does not allow you to commit a crime to get additional information on a tip. So it doesn't permit you to go seeking the photo of someone's chickens, but it would allow you, if they're in plain view from your deck, to take a picture of their chickens.
But I could attach a picture where I'm in Mark's backyard.
Good.
But you're not going to use that?
I don't know if that would be allowable or not. I think there'd be some question there, obviously.
There'd be an investigation that would be conducted based on that. So they wouldn't just go arrest somebody based on the pictures that are shown. They could be AI pictures for all the PD knows. So they still have to conduct an investigation based upon the information that they have.
But they're conducting an investigation. In the meantime, my neighbor has climbed over my fence and is in my backyard illegally. What is going to happen to my neighbor who's now submitted that picture?
So that would be a civil action.
Yes.
It would be an invasion of privacy action, but it would be against the neighbor.
But it also would be,
the recipient of the
there's a criminal
information.
offense there too. You can't go onto private property.
There is, and that's part of the investigation that PD would have to conduct in those circumstances.
Moral of the story, don't go into anybody's backyards to take pictures.
Of
Be
chickens.
responsible adults when using this app.
Anything further? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before moving on to item number 10, adjournment, I just want to, we've got some royalty in the audience today. The crown jewel of our summer is the North Dakota State Fair, and we have one of the co-grand marshals of the State Fair with us, Jill Schramm of the Minot Daily News. Jill, congratulations. Well-deserved honor for you, so thank you so much. And that takes us to item number 10, adjournment.
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned. Extra credit there, Paul.